So we can post up.
Hey guys, I think we're ready now. That's so good. We got a really tight schedule today, so we're gonna run through it real quick for this computer behind the location. So Jeremy, some important meetings that
A lot of stuff he has is sweet.
all right, well, good morning, everybody. I'm gonna take this off. Today is a big day. The bid for the downtown pavement improvement is going out today. It'll be back on May 18th. I want to walk you through really quickly what we did last year, what was remaining on last year's contract, and how we could potentially handle it. I got files. They are.
I think you're getting
Better.
Let's stop
I will say, on the last meeting, I had paid real attention to speakers at that moment. But I had a very hard time.
Was it mumbled or just loud?
It was mumbled. I cranked up the volume.
Yeah.
And still
Morning, guys. I can hear everything in the room, but it is hard to understand what's going on exactly. But I think I can make it out though.
Okay. Oh, all right. All right. Recap really quick. Since 2017, because of what the voters did for the city of Ozark, we have been able to really knock out some projects. The largest of which.
So good job. So these are probably some of the largest projects that we've taken on over the past 5 years. Jackson Street is still on schedule to be completed in November. So please keep that in mind. There have been some changes to it, but they tell me that we're still on target for late November. The actual contract isn't due until December. So liquidated damages won't begin until January. We hope that doesn't need to go down that road. They are there. Let's see here.
Do we know what we mean by liquidated damages?
I believe it's in the neighborhood of $12.50 a day for each day that they don't have it completed. ODOT actually set up remember this is an ODOT project. But working with DSS, I believe the greatest so far. They are a good contractor, and they've got a lot to finish up. So from 2017 through 2021, we've been able to really take a big swing and hit a lot of balls out of the park when it comes to local streets as well. This is a timeline on the far right is 2021. In a perfect world, that is what we would complete this year. We have designed all of those streets this year. Another quick update, all of our TAP projects are out to bid on Monday. So this has been a week of advertising bids. They all come back on May 18th. We did that strategically so that we can release a lot of projects and hopefully get some attention from some of the big contractors. So we hope that they're very competitive and we hope they sharpen their pencil. Next slide. Sorry. So this is a powerful slide. Between all the stuff that we've done and we partnered on with the OSRD, Christian County, the MODOT projects, you're looking at over $21.6 million worth of improvements. That's powerful. I mean, that is a lot of change that's occurred in the city of Ozark.
You gotta realize too that was done with local match million we raised to complete putting over $21 million worth of project.
Yeah.
It's just a great return on investment.
Very good. And to recap, last year, guys, we got Cowley Springs done. Remember that was a 2-year project. We had to make all the storm improvements first. We got those done. We came in and busted out phase 1 and 2 on Cowley Springs. When we got over to Eastland Heights, as you all know, that's one of the
older neighborhoods. It had some very old infrastructure, and it presented some challenges. When we went in there, we were thinking it was a paving project.
it turned into a sewer, water, paved, curb, storm project. It's okay, we got it done. Everything in yellow is done. The areas in blue are where we're still waiting on final lift of asphalt, top coat of asphalt. So that brings me to the point about capital. Guys, if you didn't hear, capital is the former Germany. They bought Germany now completely. And we have been transitioning with them. I've been working with our city attorney and with their senior level staff to get a reassignment of that contract so that we can finish this. We get everything executed. But one of the things that I'd like to just put out here for you today, and this is why I love these types of meetings, is we get some feedback. They have offered to come in and see these areas that we just weren't able to do because of budget. You've got 7th, 5th, and then if anybody's familiar with 2nd Avenue, that goes down from the southeast corner of the square all the way to Robertson. It's in pretty bad shape. This right here. So what they've offered to do is take last year's bid and add that additional work. All I need is hey, that sounds like an okay idea. Hey, that's not a good idea. Because remember, we got the bid packet going out today. Let's do that on May 18th. But if we were to add some additional scope, which we have to do a change order into the city roads, because last year what happened with capital insurance. If we were to add some footage, which I am waiting on, I keep saying capital to give you some cost back on those additional. I think the next slide shows the additional streets that we would be doing. So it would just be tidying up some of this downtown, finishing up the Eastland Heights, just like the previous slide showed, and then getting these taken care of. And remember, we really put the hurt on especially 2nd Avenue because of that water main that we extended through there. But that's another good point that everybody should know. All the infrastructure has been completed. We're done with that. So we're moving on to the 2nd phase, which is the roads, sidewalks, and curb gut. Yes, sir.
Just a question on 2nd Avenue. I understand how bad shape the street is in, but there are no curbs on the east side of that street right now, and there's parking. So if you resurface that, what will that do to the parking on the east side of the street?
On this particular project, all we would do is now come back to the day and do like we've done in the past, curb and gut and put a top coat. Yes, get that seat, that street suitable.
Well, what I meant was if you go back and put curb and gutter there, you're gonna, unless you widen it, you're gonna cut out a bunch of parking places.
Well, what you do, I'll cut out.
Right now, there's no curb on the east side, right, and there's people park there.
Yeah.
I mean, not the businesses, but the jurors and the court employees.
Now, this would be taking the existing street and just taking it back up to a functional mill. And then I just want to run by, Germany has presented, Capital has presented this to us. They're new to the area, they're trying to get some business. They have said that they would honor the prices from 2020, and Sam, if you keep going. Real quick, as far as this year's bid packet that's going out today, you can see everything in the blue is a full depth asphalt pavement. You can see all the sidewalk work, curb and gutter, streetscape. This is a big package. The next one shows the base bid. Our base bid will be this area right here. That is what we know we have to get done this year. And the almighty dollar is driving all of this. On the next one, I'll show you all A. All A would be one block to the north. And on the next one, I'll show you all B. So we have said, we get good prices, we're gonna go as far as we can. It's all been designed, but what this allows us to do with the finance department and with you all is pump the brakes. If we start going close to budget, we can stop. Next slide. So it all comes down to dollars. This year, we've done, I think, a fantastic job of budgeting on multiple layers. And by that, I mean, we've got some in just for sidewalks, over 2.4 for paving, that's a combination of transportation, sales tax, and it's a combination of the, okay, so we've got $3.325 million. And we're gonna take this as far as we can go. We've got a month that I can continue to work with Jeremy, our capital, sorry. If you all think it's a good idea to honor those prices, the next slide shows those prices and a historical cost comparison. One more. Last year, we received the best prices we've received since I've been here, in 2015, when we started keeping records. And remember, that's a product of a barrel of oil, and oil's obviously not. So if you all think it's a good idea to move forward, I will move forward with capital to try to get as much done in the next month under those same prices. It will just stretch $100 that much further. And it will just make this project even better. It's gonna be an awesome project. I'm telling you, it's a big one, guys. It is a big one.
There, let me ask a question just so I can figure. So if you guys saw the base bid, you saw and they saw and the D, what Jeremy's saying is we're trying to utilize previous prices to understand. So what you need from the board today is if they like that idea, which I don't know why they wouldn't, but they can ask questions, is that there has to be something that is brought from the board along in a regular session as a change order. You're just alerting to.
And we've already got a change order that we need to do because of the transition from capital to Germany. We didn't spend nearly what we thought we would last year. So there's a change order. We're going to do a couple things on full depth asphalt versus mill and fill. But yeah, you know, that's just allow progress on those exterior streets, right? Saying that they turn into a square. That's all going to be ripped out. But anything we can do and fill up that price, and I just need some direction to see if we can get that done.
Question, sorry. Just want to make sure I understand. Are you saying that the money is already allocated? So we already have it? And the issue is that if we buy in now, we'll be able to buy in at prices that you find to be very, very competitive.
I don't think we'll see prices like we had in 2020, just because of the cost of materials and structure. So yeah, it just allows us to kind of scoop in, get some additional stuff done. It's all been budgeted because we carried that over last year. We couldn't finish that due to weather. We carried it over. So it's all budgeted, and this would just give us jumpstart capital. That's because it's a job they can do right after a rainstorm. It's on existing pavement, so they don't have to wait for the base rocks to dry out. They're not messing with flooding. It gives them work to do during the spring month, where they can just come in and do it. But
Jeremy, the next time we have a problem like this, you don't have to spend too much time for that. I'm not just kidding. Thank you for your discussion. It's a very good call.
So we'll bring back whatever we need to work with Samantha, work with contract, work with capital, do whatever we need to do to bring the necessary documents for the board's statement. And now you guys got that. That's what that is.
So, and just so you all know, we're going to dive deeper into this at the morning meetings or the breakfast meetings on the downtown project, because this is going to be about communication. It's a big project, and we don't keep communicating. You know, and just communication. We'll talk more about these projects as we move forward.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
RJ?
I think we're.
Yes, sir.
All right, you good with that?
I'll be honest, I really had a hard time understanding. I could hear him when he was in front of the podium there, but when he walked in front of it, it gets really muted for me. I think I caught kind of the basics of it, but I really honestly couldn't weigh in on it, truthfully.
All right, well, I think there's a majority. Bring it back.
All right, good morning. I'm going to remove my mask so I can present to you from up here. This morning, I'm going to be presenting a topic related to municipal court. So for those of you who may be new to the board or returning, a brief introduction. I'm the city attorney. I'm Amanda Calloway, and I perform two roles for the city. I am both the civil attorney for the departments, meaning I provide civil legal work on a daily basis to all of the departments and the board itself. I also have a criminal element to my job where I prosecute all of the crimes in our city that fall in our city ordinances. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of background, and then I'm going to present a question today with the help of Steve Childers, our city administrator, to address some concerns that were brought forward by the Supreme Court of Missouri related to operations of municipal courts. So a little bit of background. I think it's always important that everybody understands how you got the power that we're asking you to decide how you're going to use it. So the power is established for the Supreme Court in the Missouri Constitution. Prior to the constitutional amendment that we view as the most up-to-date constitution for Missouri, there was no judicial branch. The judicial branch was actually established in the most recent amendment, and the judicial branch establishes that the state of Missouri is going to have a Supreme Court, it's going to have circuit courts, and it's going to have Court of Appeals. They actually delegate in that constitution, which obviously has to be adopted by the citizens of Missouri. They delegate the authority to have municipal courts to the state legislature. The state legislature then gave that power to municipalities. So it's a choice of municipalities to have municipal courts. And that's important because that's the power that has been delegated to you as the board that makes those legislative decisions for your city. So as we move forward through this discussion, remember that that power has been given to you and you have the decision to make about how you're going to utilize that power for your community and the citizens. Next slide. In 2015, we saw the result of what we all referred to as Ferguson. There was an overview related to municipal courts and how they operate. This impacted all municipal courts in the state of Missouri. Briefly, what the amendments did was they placed additional restrictions on the revenue that municipal courts can bring in. What was happening, as we know, cities can get revenue through taxes. That does not always make ends meet. So municipalities saw that they could have additional revenue brought in through municipal court fines, because through the state legislature, you are authorized as a fourth-class city to fine all the way up to $500 for each and every violation. Some cities impose that maximum penalty, and you may be familiar with other cities that had tickets where they had a quota for tickets. This was all to address those issues because municipalities were relying on that revenue. Well, in 2015, post-Ferguson, the state of Missouri, the legislature, imposed Senate Bill 5. That added those restrictions. What you see there represented on your screen is a summary, and what it placed on municipalities is a maximum fine for minor traffic violations. Minor traffic violations are going to be those violations that you would witness if somebody is speeding on the street, a stop sign violation, anything that you would consider minor. Those were capped at $300. That included court costs. Our court costs are $38.50. So combined with court costs, you could only ever receive the $300. In 2016, they further reduced that in a second Senate bill. They reduced it to $225. So now you have a cap on minor traffic violations of $225. In addition to that, they realized there were other municipal violations where cities were imposing harsh penalties. Those include the nuisance violations. Those are violations that the planning department issues citations for, and they are going to be something I talk about later related to quality of life. So they placed caps on those as well. So we saw a reform in what municipal courts could do. Any questions so far about any of what I've explained related to the background? All right, next slide. This slide represents how many citations the city of Ozark receives in its municipal court. We have in 2017 about 1,500, 2018 about 1,300, 2019 about 1,800, and then 2020, I do have an asterisk by it because it was a relatively low year. We had a period of time where we weren't issuing citations as frequently during the pandemic, and so we saw only about 1,005 citations issued that came to municipal court. Just so it's clear, your police department can issue citations under the state laws, and they can issue citations under your city laws. Some city laws are not reflected in the state law. So sometimes you may have a situation where someone is stopped and they violate the state law, and they also violate municipal laws, and that case is split, and we have separate cases in the two jurisdictions. The total number of tickets will result in revenue for your city. That's obvious, and that's represented on the screen. However, it is important, as I'll discuss later, that that's not the actual value that municipal court has in your municipality. So when we talk about what type of cases we see in municipal court, I think it's important to understand what type of cases I'm prosecuting and that the police are enforcing and the code enforcement are enforcing. You have things such as tall weeds and grass, inoperable vehicles, people who fail to get fence permits. We prosecute that because it's important that they actually go through the proper procedures to build things on their property pursuant to the laws that you've adopted as a board. We have drug crimes that we prosecute. Marijuana, it may be a surprise to you, but the state of Missouri only criminalizes above 34 grams of marijuana at a state level. So some cities in Missouri have removed that crime from their municipal code, so they do not prosecute anything below 34 grams. So marijuana is actually legal in their communities. In your community, you have a city code section that makes that a crime. So that's an element that's not represented in the state law. If you were wondering how much that is, it would be a full sandwich bag. The narcotics paraphernalia charge is a frequent charge that I see in our court. That charge is not only a device that is used to ingest marijuana, but it would be any narcotic. So we frequently see methamphetamine paraphernalia and heroin paraphernalia, and those are things that I prosecute. That might be surprising because it seems level of crime, but that is something that we do. You also have your traffic offenses, which I've already discussed, but those are things that you may see as you drive down the street, somebody who's speeding, running a stop sign, maybe somebody who hits you and you're in an accident and you later realize that they don't have any insurance. That impacts you significantly. We also have stealing cases, and so on a rare occasion, we have assault cases. So that gives you a full picture of all the types of crimes that we are prosecuting. Any questions related to that? All right, next slide. All right, so this demonstrates the larger value. So on the last slide, we saw the dollar value of court. This is the real value of court. So you have a community that's primarily residential. And I'm sure that all of you have neighbors or someone that lives close to you. And if one of those crimes that I just described was being committed by your neighbor, your quality of life would decrease. If they had tall weeds and grass that were harboring rodents, if they had inoperable vehicles, if they were doing drugs on their property, if they were doing any one of those number of crimes, speeding through your neighborhood, that's been a frequent discussion related to planning and development. Abiding by stop signs, that's been frequent. So those things all impact you on a daily basis. And that's what creates behaviors through the enforcement of those crimes. So the enforcement element, the city code enforcement, you have the police department that's out there writing citations. You have the code enforcement, which is through the planning and development department that writes all of the nuisance violations. And then you have the animal control officers that do write violations for dogs at large, failure to register, and dog bites. All of those things together with the municipal court create your enforcement mechanism. So without the municipal court, you really have no incentive for people to follow your laws because penalty. The penalty is designed to conform behaviors, and those behaviors create the quality of life that you desire in your community. Because if you didn't believe in those laws, you would remove them, and then the behaviors would adapt. So the greater value is the quality of life. Well, what does quality of life bring us? Quality of life brings us economic development. If this is a place where people want to live and work, then you're going to have greater economic development and investment in your community. You're going to have theaters. You're going to have businesses and restaurants. So it all ties together because your laws are establishing a set of behaviors that are acceptable to your community and your citizens. So that's the greater value of municipal court. All right. So some background about the municipal court itself. The municipal court has 3 full-time staff members. Those include the prosecutor, which is myself. I do split my duties between the 2 roles. And we have a municipal clerk and assistant municipal court clerk. Those duties will represent all of the work for the municipal court. And presently, it is important to note that the municipal court clerk, that position is unfilled right now. We have 3 contract employees. The municipal judge. The municipal judge is contracted at $350 per session. It is important to note that that contract is something that was brought forward before I started working in Ozark. And that contract would mean that that judge would receive $350 whether he shows up for 15 minutes or for 4 hours. So that is something that you may want to consider as you move forward in terms of negotiating the rate of pay for maybe potentially an hourly rate as opposed to per session. There are 2 bailiffs. Those bailiffs are provided by the Christian County Sheriff's Department. They receive $75 per session. They provide the court security. Ready to move forward? Oh, that was supposed to be up at the last slide. Ready to move forward again. This represents, and it's really small to read, and I will email it to you after the presentation. This represents all of the work that the municipal court clerk does. I want to demonstrate to you that these are employees that are busy from 8 to 5, and they have a high standard of customer service that they are delivering to your constituents because they interact with them on a daily basis, and it's on things that are not comfortable to talk about. It's criminal prosecution, and they represent a high degree of professionalism as required by the Supreme Court of Missouri. So these employees have a high burden, and they also have a high degree of work that they're performing. I was asked how many files we have. And when I talk about a file, I brought a demonstrative piece of evidence here. This is a court file. And we have 6,000 of these that are active. And what that means when it's active, it means it's somewhere in the process after the point that the prosecutor has filed it, before the individual has fully paid all of their fines. Now I'm going to walk you through that. So when the ticket comes in, and our law enforcement officer here may not appreciate this, but I brought the stack of tickets and I'll pass them around to you. Just don't take any out. I'm trusting you here. So you get a full representation there. That's what I received from Chief Arnold's department. That represents 1 week of tickets. That's a pretty large stack. I presently have 8 of those stacks that have not been filed into the court operating software because we have tickets all the way through August that will be coming to court. So our court dates are full through August. So what I'm trying to represent is every time I get one of those tickets, I have to read the police report because it's my ethical duty to make sure that the elements of the crime have been met. And then I sign the ticket and I file it. Now, what our court clerks do is they enter all that information from the physical ticket into the court software. One member of our board here is familiar with that. That is CaseNet. It is also called Show Me Courts on the back end. And what that does is it inputs all that information so you can access that online. That will soon be transferred to electronic ticketing. However, I want to make sure you understand that the actual physical file does not go away just because you have e-ticketing. The prosecutor is required to have files as well as the court. So the file itself will remain regardless of the fact that you have e-ticketing. What the file does, this file actually represents 2. You've got a prosecutor's section and you've got the court section. So in this file, if you actually were to count, we have 12,000 files because you have duplicate files for the prosecutor. And that's all the work I do. They have to be separate. So you have 2 files. So that's what the court clerks do on a big scale. Day to day, they're interacting with your citizens. They have walk-in clients. They have motions that are filed online. They manage those 6,000 files. Those files are always moving. They have to reset them on a docket. They have to transition them if somebody enters their appearance, if a lawyer wants to represent someone. So those files are always being managed. And that is an 8 to 5 full-time position for 2 employees. Is there any question about what the municipal court employees do? All right. I have a second slide that represents what the assistant court clerk does. It largely is the same as the court clerk. So they operate and do the same thing. The timeline of the current issues is represented on your screen. So in March, unbeknownst to the city, the administrative branch of our Supreme Court, which is called OSCA, did an independent review by reviewing our website. And as you know, we recently redid our website with the help of our public information officer, and we tried to represent a comprehensive view of what our department does. And based on that review that OSCA did, they have received or sent to the city some recommendations on how we can better clarify the separation between your judicial branch of government and then the rest of your government. So that's what you're going to see next and how they view that. So the recommendations from OSCA are that the municipal judge, who's a contract employee, they need to take more of a supervisory role. Presently, they do not perform daily supervision of the court clerks. This judge is in the office 1 day a week, and the judge does communicate with them as needed for other matters, but they would expect that the judge has more of a direct role in that supervision of those employees, which means doing their annual evaluations, approving their time. And really what was suggested by OSCA was that that judge, who's a part-time employee, would work with our HR director who could provide that support to them. So we do have a mechanism to take that over and to transfer that. In addition to that, as you know, we have a space issue at the city. We don't have new buildings like some municipalities, and we are just trying to make do with what we've got. And we have a pretty good setup right now, but OSCA thinks that we need to change that setup. And what that looks like to OSCA, which is this supervisory organization, is that the municipal prosecutor and the clerks have to be separate. Right now, I have an office. If you haven't been there, you're welcome to come visit me and I'll give you a tour. It's a pretty small office, so it won't take long. But my office is inside where the municipal court is. And according to them, that gives the impression of impropriety or that it's unethical because I am where the clerks are. Now, I want to confirm to you that I hold my ethics to the highest degree and there is nothing unethical occurring. But however, we recognize that perception could be made with the public. So we, of course, want to adhere to the highest degree of ethics and professionalism to that appropriately, and we will try to design a separation there. So those are the 2 changes that will have to happen. All right, now we get to the options, and this is where I believe Mr. Childers is going to introduce you. But if you have any questions, or if you'd like to see the day-to-day operation of the municipal court, I would be happy for any of you to visit. We have court every Tuesday. We have about 36 arraignment dockets, and you're welcome to come visit. Some things that I didn't touch on, but I will just touch on briefly. When I took over in 2017 for the former city attorney, I tried to evaluate how we could reduce our impact on the general budget. And I think some of the board members have heard this previously, but since we have new people, I think it's important that you hear this. We had trial dockets where no one would ever actually have a trial. Defendants feel that they want to talk to the prosecutor, and that's understandable. They just want to tell their side of the story. Up to that point, everybody who wanted to do that was scheduled for a trial docket, which meant that the city was spending $6,000 a year on a day when no trials were happening. So what I decided to do was I instituted at the arraignment docket a pretrial conference. All that means is that I will meet with any defendant that wants to meet with me, because I think that's the highest degree of customer service that I can provide to our citizens, because then they don't have to take another day off work. They don't have to potentially get fired for taking that day off work, because the people that are coming to court that you see represented there are not the people who have vacation days. They're not the people that have PTO, paid time off. They're taking a cut from their pay potentially to come to court. So I value that, and I meet with them on that day and we resolve their case that day. This is not common in other municipalities. Generally, you have to come back on a different day, and that's for larger municipalities in our region and equal municipalities in our region. It takes 2 court hearings. I resolve it in 1. What that also did was it eliminated the trial docket. This doesn't mean that if somebody doesn't want a trial, that they can't have one. It just means that most people, once they talk to the prosecutor, there's no need for a trial because they've resolved whatever's happening. I think this provides a better resolution to everything in our community. I also allow people to get licensed and get their insurance. This doesn't mean that you're not fining them. You still get your revenue as a municipality. But what this means is, because I'm sure none of you have ever gotten a ticket for no license, if you are convicted of that, you lose your license for a year. There's no getting it back. So imagine that, and then that downward spiral that comes from that when you can't drive to work and you can't afford your insurance and everything that comes from that. And they rack up more tickets. Chief Arnold can tell you that. The police officers will recognize them and they will get more no license tickets. So they're not going to get out of this easily. But what I do is I give them time, because that's what I can do. I reset them and I keep resetting them so that they have an incentive to get their license and resolve their ticket. So far, I have 100% compliance in that. Every single person that I give time to get their license has gotten it. And it's a lot of work for a lot of them. They have to complete things that are not pleasant through other courts and take classes and do SATOP and take care of other things that are hard. But all I'm doing is giving them time, because then when you're driving and you get into an accident, that person will likely have a license and insurance, and that protects our community. So that is my perspective of municipal court. And now I'll turn it over to Steve Childers.
Anybody have any questions before I jump in?
Okay, Amanda, thank you. So we're basically faced with, what do we do next? Okay, so I wanted Amanda to present that because I wanted to make sure that you understood. Bruce, you may understand that you're more experienced than most of us in court, or at least I hope that we don't. But what is it all about, and how much work goes into it, and what really makes up the municipal court? But when I got that call from Oscar, when I was sitting in my truck getting ready to come in, and we immediately responded to Judge Johnson. We set up a meeting. We went through that whole process. It just simply presented us with a situation that I have to step back from and say, okay, here's the big picture of the city. And it's really sort of tangible, but it can be intangible. And that's really what I want to bring to your attention today. Everything Amanda said, you can tell she's got the passion. I believe in her. We have an amazing legal department. I went over there yesterday and spent an hour and 15 minutes again, understanding files and talking to the staff and all of that. We are down one employee. We do not currently have a municipal court clerk. I mean, we're utilizing the staff that we have to fulfill those positions, but we have a vacancy that we have put out. And we were going through that process when we got notified by Oscar that, hey, we've got this issue, and they gave us that report. But here's where we're at. We've got a couple of options. We can either look at this and say, if we really believe, go to the next slide, if we really believe that we want to keep our court because we believe that's an important thing for the quality of life of the citizens of Ozark. We believe that having them come to this location and work with our city attorney / prosecutor in that way is better than for them and their ability to change their lives
is better than sending them over to the county court, then that's an option. You keep the court, you try to do as much as you can to maybe add another docket, or excuse me, add another court day so that you can shrink the daily docket of that court day. You modify the agreement of the contract employee, which is our judge. Guys, our judge is a contract employee. It's not a city employee. We have a contract with the judge. And so you might modify that in a way that can save some money, but you still have your bailiffs. You still have those types of things that you have to do. So you have an option. You keep you in a municipal court. You know, if you keep that, the city of Ozark is still going to be growing. And so whether you keep that or you move that to the county, the likelihood of having to continue to add staff over the next 10 years, it's not going to be that different either way. You still have work to do, like those files and things that Amanda was talking about. So that's option one. You keep the court, and again, we'll send this out to you to look at this. We just want to talk to you today because we have to move forward. Sam, can you go to the next slide? Option two is this, and we're seeing this as a trend throughout the state. And NICSA is discussing this as well. So when this came up, Senate Bill 5, it was the underlying belief, or it was the thought that the real intent of Senate Bill 5 was to eventually eliminate all municipal courts across the state. Okay, we're just going to do away with municipal court. Eventually, this unfunded mandate is going to keep these courts from operating. It's not going to be something that the small municipalities use as a revenue source anymore, which is good. It never was supposed to be that. I'm just saying that that's what was behind it all. So they passed Senate Bill 5. Since they did that, when they first did that, we actually approached our friends out in Sparta. They have a municipal court. NICSA approached our friends out in Highlandville, Clever, and Billings, because that would be the east. And we thought, well, maybe we'll have an east and a west, and maybe we can combine this. Those smaller courts, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to team up. We're not interested in that. A year later, they have no municipal courts. Sparta's already shifted their courts over to the county. So has Clever, so has Highlandville. I'm sure Billings is right around the corner. And now NICSA is talking about it, because right after we received our report from OSCA, NICSA received a report from OSCA as well. So clearly OSCA is paying attention to this area, probably all the areas that still have municipal courts. And they're really pushing, you know. So we have to sit back and say, well, what does that mean for us? You know, do we keep it or do we shift it over? That doesn't mean you're not going to have municipal laws. That doesn't mean that Amanda doesn't have to do prosecutor work, because she does. That doesn't mean that the staff that we have over there now doesn't have to do work, because they do. I saw it yesterday. I know that, okay? But what it does mean is that you just simply lose that control of your municipal court, because it goes to a different judge, okay? Not that we tell the judge what to do, but I just mean that you don't have the same environment, okay? But I wanted to explain that to you, because here's the other part of it. Can you go to the next slide? Here's all the concerns, and I'm going to run down through this because facility space needs. All right, we all know that we have antiquated facilities. We all know that we need to build new facilities, probably for City Hall, as well as police, as well as public works and everything else. We all know how difficult that's going to be, because the cost of building those facilities is almost out of reach, unless you triple your city property tax levy, or you find some other incredibly new revenue source that's going to be able to pay the bond debt on a $15 to $20 million building. I mean, that's just where you're at. So the likelihood of being able to build a new police station, nope, are crying. He does that sometimes. It's hard to really wrap your mind. I don't know how we'll do it. So what do? We back up and we say, we got to maximize our facilities that we have. What can we do? You're in a building right now that has little options, okay? We've tried everything over the last 17 years, and we've maximized the space in this building. That's about all you can do. We turned the mayor's office into a conference room because we're out of space to meet with developers, because we're moving so fast. It's those kind of things. What you're faced with the situation now is, you're like, okay, I understand the courts, but I have to ask myself the question, where's the most important flaws? If I can still have municipal laws and I can enforce those laws, do we keep those because of the benefits that Ms. Calloway explained to you? Or do we unfortunately shift that over to the county, where they'll be taken care of? And the county in Senate Bill 5, they can't deny us that request. I mean, that's part of the bill is that we say you're taking it, they're taking it. Now, we're not going to do it that way. We've already asked them, what would that look like? How would you do that? We do know that Judge Bacon, who handles the 3 smaller municipalities that I said, one concern of Ms. Callaway was, look, I can't, I'm a civil attorney and I'm also a prosecutor, so I can't shift all my time over to being a prosecutor if you have me over there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and my docket is all over the place. So the big dependent, and they said they would do this, is that Judge Bacon, you have to create a day for just Ozark and Nixa. That's how big our dockets are. I think you said 160.
160 defendants scheduled.
I mean, it's a big day.
160 separate crimes.
So we just have to look at this and we can talk about it more. We wanted to generate this presentation to give you this idea because certainly OSCA is working with Judge Johnson to say, you guys have to make a decision. If you're going to keep it, you need to get a municipal court clerk. The other thing about Senate Bill 5 that's odd is that you have to separate these duties. So anybody that's doing work for our civil attorney can't be working for the municipal court. Okay, you can't commingle those things. And as far as OSCA is concerned, you can't even sit in the same office. You can't even be sitting here looking at Eddie and go, oh, well, I'm doing civil work and you're doing project. You can't do that. You have to completely, so we need to create new space for a person or a couple people or however that works in the municipal court. So what I'm saying is that we have the Brick Street Plaza. Right now, the area called the Old Church has freed itself up and we intend to be able to remodel that to benefit our public works department. We were going to shift our legal department over to the front of that church and then the detectives would move into what we call the legal department now. So we're just trying to keep the departments compact and contiguous instead of jumping, okay? If we had more space, and keep in mind, and I do not know, like I told you, there will be stimulus dollars coming to the city of Ozark. I do not know yet what the limitations and specifications on using that will be. I trust and hope that we'll be able to use it on facility upgrades. I don't know that. So this also all depends on what they let us do with that money. Because if we're going to say, man, the next 10 years is probably likely we're going to have to use these buildings, then I say the Brick Street Plaza building is probably the most likely scenario. We've been working with our architect to develop space needs analysis, and we can show you, we will when we get there, what does that look like and how will we move people around to try to maximize the need for office space with those departments we recognize as growing faster. So anyway, that's where you're at. Do I keep the municipal court or I transfer it to the county? Because if the immediate benefits are greater to you because of a facility upgrade situation that will get us another 10 years, then that's a heavy factor. If the concern that we're going to lose control over the courts and that quality of life and that direct relationship between our prosecutor and our judge and our clients, then you need to weigh that too. So we're just giving you both of these things to weigh because there's a decision that needs to be made and we need to talk about that further. So, question?
Just to clarify, we're not being asked to scrap Ozark's municipal code as it its criminal offenses. We're just being asked to outsource our court to a judge, a city judge.
Well, we're not the city. Yeah, Bruce asked whether or not we were being asked to get rid of our municipal codes and laws, or we were just being asked to shift our municipal court over to the county. I just want to be clear, that may be kind of what we're asking you, but OSCA didn't really say, hey, you got to switch your court over here. They didn't say that. What OSCA is saying is, we went online and we viewed your facility and we feel like your facility is not meeting the rules of Senate Bill 5 with regards to where your staff sits and how you're communicating and whether or not you have a municipal court clerk. So they're telling us to just fix the problem. And what that has led us to is an evaluation of, well, what is the best and most effective way to fix this problem? And so I hope that answers your question, but I know, yeah.
Clarify my question. what is before us as a matter of policy is whether we have a judge over the county where decide our code violations, or whether we have a judge that we hire and sits over here on Brick Street. I mean, that's the issue, whether we, I'm asking, is that the issue?
In the most simplistic of terms, yes, but I will, turn it over to you.
And so RJ can give the answer to your question. You know, Bruce, Alderman Galloway rephrased his question as to whether we're being asked to just transfer where the cases are heard. Is it?
I was asking the issue that we were deciding, why we're here, why we're listening to this. Well, the issue is, do we have a county judge decide our cases, or do we have our contract city judge decide our cases? I'm asking, is that the issue?
That is a very simple way of phrasing the issue. The greater impact to how that is handled would be, it seems simple about whether it's your contract judge reviewing the cases or if it's a circuit court judge reviewing the cases. And yes, I can see that perspective. However, to the citizens being impacted about where their access to justice is, I think that's actually the full question and the full issue that we're asking, because there are many things that happen in our municipal court that we can do in an easier process, because we have clerks that are housed in our office. We have a judge that is open to discussing how those cases are prosecuted, and we have a connection with those citizens. Some of that will be lost when you transfer it to the county. And it's not because Judge Bacon is any different of a judge. He has a much higher degree of crimes that he generally sees. That docket will be handled differently than it is at municipal court. And so the difference is, yes, in some ways, where it is heard or who hears it, but on a larger scale, it's that customer service that they're receiving from the city of Ozark in prosecuting the crimes that are being enforced from your city code.
It'd be fair to say that what you're saying is we do have to decide whether we use the county courts to decide our laws. That's the issue that's before us. But you believe that there are advantages to keeping the judiciary under our.
Absolutely. I believe there's a reason that the state legislature delegated that authority to municipalities, and they gave you that power. And that's why I described that at the beginning. That's important. You have the authority to have a court. That is an important power because it is the last level of enforcement of all of your crimes. And when you give that up and you give it to the county, it's not something you get back. And so it is such an important decision for your constituents to consider where those cases are heard. And it's not a difference of the judges. The judges are both professional. They're both judges. They're trained as judges. It's just a different level of court. You have quality of life issues that we're hearing in our court, and you have larger crimes over in Christian County. And I think some of that level of responsiveness will be lost because it'll be a more formalized process where in our court, we actually try to get to know the citizens and I hear their background, and some of that you may not have over at county. So I think it would be a disservice to your citizens to dissolve your municipal court for a space issue. I think there are other solutions that can be considered to reduce the footprint of the municipal court in that building and still achieve what I'm describing in terms of justice for your citizens without having to transfer that over. And that's why I'm advocating to keep municipal court. And I did ask Steve if I was able to advocate for that. And I think that that is what I'm trying to reflect in my presentation.
Okay. You have some remarks. That's okay.
No, yes, go ahead.
So, one minute.
This one, the little round. I'm gonna give you this, Bruce. RJ's listening to this one. Oh, that's good. There you go.
All right, so just by way of background, there were some documents that were exchanged between the city and OSCA and the circuit judge, Laura Johnson, who's the elected judge, and she handles, ultimately, she's responsible for all cases in our circuit. And one document that I reviewed was the OSCA report. Now, the other document was the city's response to the OSCA report. And the third document was Judge Johnson's response to the city's response. I also, Judge Johnson made it a point to stop by my office and talk to me directly about this issue. So if I can kind of go back to what the real issue is, we have what's proposed to us, and Judge Johnson, or I also reviewed a proposed intergovernmental agreement, is for us to send our cases over to the county courthouse, and Judge Bacon would be the one that would be deciding presently. And to do that by an intergovernmental agreement. And so specifically what's proposed is that we send them over there, and although we don't have any obligation, that we contribute financially to the hiring of a part-time clerk to handle the docket. So Judge Johnson reviewed that with me. And certainly she was serious in reviewing that with me. She wasn't there talking hypothetically about things. And my response was, if we do that, and then I would want to do that with other communities, and I want to cost share that. You know, I don't want us to pay for the court solely. But if Nixa and these other courts do it, if I would want to cost share. And she said, oh, that's fair. All right, so the issue really is, do we outsource the judge to the judge over in county? So here's how I look at it, and I've given some thought, and I read those documents, and they are, I mean, Amanda did a very spirited job, I think, of addressing, maybe the way to put it, OSCA's criticisms of our courts. But Judge Johnson did a rather thorough job of addressing our city attorney's positions. And Judge Johnson's assessments are that we are not in compliance with Supreme Court rules, and we have to change. Okay. And that was very clearly stated in her letter. So the one thing that's an issue is we can't keep it the same way. We have to make changes. And the reason why I say that is just by way of background. You heard something about Article 5. So Amanda described very carefully, we have the judicial branch. It can be confusing because we actually fund the judicial branch at the city level. All right. And so you're like, well, who would really control that court? Is that us? Or is that the courts? Because Article 5 is set up as a hierarchy. You got the state Supreme Court right up here. Then you got your appellate courts. And then you've got your circuit judges. And your associate circuit judges below that, which are all deciding state law cases. And then the municipal judges. Well, actually, under Article 5, our municipal courts are directly accountable to the Missouri Supreme Court. OSCA is the bureaucratic arm of the Missouri Supreme Court. Now, if you've ever been before a judge, they command, or a good judge will command their courtroom. And they will sometimes raise their voices and kind of react to that kind of thing. Nothing makes a circuit judge squirm than OSCA's interest in its operations, because OSCA controls the purse strings for the courts. And OSCA is the bureaucratic arm of the Supreme Court. So when OSCA sends us a report that says you're not in compliance, that doesn't just shake our tree, it shakes the circuit judge's tree. Because the circuit judge reports to the Article 5 authority, the top authority, and that's the Supreme Court. So we do have important decisions to make because we don't have any choice but to make them. Now, I'd like to, I've read through those things. If I could just clarify what it is that they're really concerned about. And Amanda went through it in detail, but I think that it kind of stepped back. How many here have heard about separation of powers? Been a while since we went to a civics class, okay? I'm in the court system, so I deal with this constantly. So separation of powers just means in the United States, you have the executive branch, which enforces the law, the legislative branch, which writes the law, enacts the law, and the judicial branch that applies the law and interprets the law. Separation. And so separation of powers is everybody works independently and everybody is a check and balance on the other. So you've heard check and balance. Okay, so that's separation of powers. There's your civics lesson today, and I'm not charging for it. What they're saying we are doing wrong is a change in policy for them. We were doing the things that every city board did for years and years and years and years. So we are following accepted practices. And what is accepted practice at the city level is a blurring of the lines between the judicial branch and the executive branch. For example, maybe before Amanda worked at the city of Springfield, their city judge was hired by the city attorney who hired the prosecutor and who made personnel decisions. So, you know, that kind of blurs the line. That was all okay. That was all considered okay. Senate Bill 5 was one way to address for the legislature what they felt were reforms that were needed at the city level. Article 5 gives the Supreme Court the power to write standards for judges because they run everything. Everything is accountable to us in standards reports. They changed theirs. And they said, we want separation of powers, not at the same level as everywhere else, but we want it. We do not want people to think that the city judge is controlled by the city attorney, who is the city prosecutor. Does that all make sense? And so they have this standard called appearance of impropriety, which is one of the weakest standards for law, and that it's easy to prove. And you know what they're saying essentially is, look, we looked at your processes and your hierarchies and your space and so on, and the appearance of impropriety is that controlled by the executive branch, essentially. That if you distill it to its most basic component, that's what it is. And they said, we're not having it. That's the Oscar report. It says we are not having it. So we want you to change. So that's how it got to us. And as I read the city's response, I think it was essentially that, well, I disagree with how you're applying these standards. I don't think it applies to that. I think you have a highly ethical attorney, you know, very ethical. These rules were designed for the unethical attorney, you know, and it's probably a bit great. And there are, believe it or not, some unethical attorneys. I read about it. So, the thing is, what do we do about it? That's the issue that's before us. Do we set up a court system that is truly functions with the separation of powers, its own clerk, a judge that is not hired within the legal department, that is independent of the city legal department, do we have a clerk that is dedicated only to city court business? Because that's what they're saying. Your court clerk is working for the city prosecutor, even if it's in a civil setting. And then saying that's a violation of our new standards that we're applying here. And they also don't like how our space is. They don't want people sitting, as Steve was saying to Eddie, they won't want the court clerk eyeballing the prosecutor at her desk or his desk, as other counties do. They want them out because of separation of power. It's the appearance of impropriety, that weak standard. They're saying you've got to do it. So if you're going to refine that issue a bit more, the issue is, do we go out and get more space? Do we go out and do we reform how we hire the city judge to where it's truly independent? Do we reform how the city clerk does its business and keep it absolutely separate from every other part of the city? Well, my view is different, and I think Amanda makes a great point, but my conclusion is a bit different, and I do want to address Amanda's point. My thinking is, no, that is very costly. We are a city that manages a shoestring budget, and we do it constantly, and we have people that are very adept at doing it, and they do amazing work every day. But really, it's just too much for us. And so, especially if you weigh it to what we lose. Okay, and I want to address that. So, first point was, look, we've got to get in compliance with OSCA. We've got no choice. The circuit judge is very, very, very interested in this, and we are directly beholden to her. And the circuit judge is talking about this intergovernmental agreement. I mean, the circuit judge said, well, I'm not saying you have to do this. Why is she in my office on her workday, interrupting my schedule, talking to me about exactly this? Okay. My thinking is, what do we lose by outsourcing to Judge Baker? Now, what you won't lose is Amanda. Okay. Amanda, who has, from all accounts, really helped people who are impoverished, that are having difficulty maintaining their operator's license. And it's a huge, huge problem. I practiced criminal defense. I was a public defender a long time ago representing poor people. That was a big issue. And once they get behind on traffic tickets and points and so on, and they lose their license, it's just the spiral to prison. I mean, I've seen people go to prison on driving while revoked felony charges that committed nothing other than the offense of driving to work. So we don't lose that with Amanda. That's called prosecutorial discretion. Nor do we lose, potentially, unless we decide to, our city code. We're just, the issue is, do we have Judge Bacon decide cases under our city code? Does our prosecutor go over to Judge Bacon and do her cases there? Now, Judge Bacon came from Greene County. His dad worked in Greene County. Greene County has these different programs that are designed to address special situations like that. I think everybody that works in the criminal justice system understands it's pretty rough on the poor. So and the mentally ill, so they set up different programs. He's familiar with that. But it would be, from Amanda's point of view, no guarantee that she would have the ability to delay those cases long enough to where, Judge Bacon would be comfortable for them getting their license. I will just say, from the point of view of personality, I think that Judge Bacon is pretty aware of those issues in criminal law as well. So I'm not sure that we will lose that. But I did want to point out something about that. We can't control our judge. We just can't. We cannot do it. We hire our own judge, and that judge has to work independently of us because of separation of powers. And we don't have control over that judge, not if the Supreme Court posture gets its way. And I think that's an important consideration. Either way, we have an independent judiciary. So then I go back to cost. We have closed session meetings about space that we don't have enough. This, if we decide to keep our courts, we have to go out and find space. We run on a shoestring budget. We have to find people to manage that court system. Whereas on our side of things, we don't have to pay Judge Bacon. And in my discussions with the circuit judge, she is open to us trying to work with other municipalities to cost share even a part-time clerk to handle our stuff, our cases. So, you know, weighing that, I weigh it a bit differently. But I think I want to make just the broader point. There's such a thing as walking quietly and carrying a big stick. And I kind of made that point earlier about circuit judges. I'm wrapping up. They command their courtroom. But you mention Asta and they are shaking in their boots. When Asta is telling you you are doing something wrong, you are shaking in your boots. You do it because it's a hierarchy. There's no legislature you go to and say, you know, Sturgis, please go talk to the Supreme Court about this. No, that's not how it works. This is top down. And they cannot say what is on the table here with Senate Bill 5 and their changes on standards. I'm telling them, we have to be willfully blind not to that the people in power have dismissed municipal courts. That is why they are making it expensive. That is why they are laying down those standards. That is why they are restricting revenue. And you buck them, you're going to lose. You set up your courts, you better have it exactly the way they want and spend the money that they want and have the space that they want. Because the people you go to say, but we did it right. The standards are we think this, we fall within the standards. Are the same people who told you to do it. It's the courts. And that's my point. We really, in the end, have a Hobson's choice. Going back to the issue. A Hobson's choice is no choice at all. And that's my point. So it's different from Amanda's, and you have to understand where Amanda comes from, and it comes from a good place. But the reality of the situation is the die is cast.
I know we need to move on. We've got a couple of guests. Thank you very much. So where we're at, I'll just wrap this up, is that you don't have a decision to make today. We wanted to bring this, you don't have a decision to make today. We wanted to mention, let you know we're dealing with it appropriately. I can tell you that NICSA will be discussing this topic at their June retreat, and we'll likely be making a decision on this in July. That doesn't mean we have to be in lockstep with them on a timestamp. I'm just telling you they're going through the same process, and so I'm communicating with the city attorney and how that's going and what that looks like, and our circuit court judge. We have, although we had put the announcement for the municipal court clerk out there, we have put that on hold as far as hiring that. till we could have this conversation, until we could figure out where we were going. So that's where we're at, but yes, ma'am.
Is there a time limit on when you need to move one direction?
Well, let me hope I can say this right. So we asked Judge Laura Johnson, who is over all the municipal courts, for some time. Because at first it was like, you need to immediately do this and separate. Well, we just physically couldn't do it, you know? And so I think her order said the clock will begin ticking after you hire your municipal clerk. So we are slowing the hiring of that municipal clerk to get ourselves more time on the back end to make this decision. And again, you know, we wanted to be respectful of the circuit court, because if the dockets of Ozark and Nixa were to go over there, that's a big docket. That's a whole nother, I mean, they're gonna have to have more court dates. You know what I mean? So she was visiting with Barbie Stillings and Judge Bacon and working on that. So we're also very, we're communicating every week with Judge Johnson over at Circuit Court too. So we can have more details next time we discuss this. So, but we wanted to bring it to you. Now, we're gonna shift to movies and movie theaters. And Dennis McIntyre is going to come up. And some of you that have been here a while may recognize him. Brad was here. It's been a long time. Whenever B&B was literally looking at across the street. And thank goodness Dennis was nice enough to work with me and say, nope, we're not leaving Ozark. We're putting one here. We just found another location. So listen, this has been an industry very hard hit from the pandemic. And I really thought it would be important for Dennis to be able to come and say, listen, we're okay. We're not leaving Ozark. We just want to let you know where we're at. So, because I think that's an incredibly important business that we have out there. So Dennis, come on up and you can visit with me.
Overhead fans or anything. So, well, thanks, Steve. And thank you for letting me come in. Can everybody hear me okay? I can go louder. My wife says I can. So I wanted to appear. This is not my first time being in this chamber. Normally I don't make repeat performances, Steve, but for you, I'll do it. And give you a very quick idea of where we are as an industry, as a company, and then the Ozark Nixa facility as well. So no surprise, we were hit pretty hard. Some people don't realize how hard we were hit. We were in 2000, we were shut down for 6 months as an industry. We date back to 1924. At no time, war, famine, depression, was there a time when the entire industry was shut down completely. When we reopened with a staggered reopening, but at no point did any of our individual theaters, and really any theater in the nation, ever operate in 2020 above 20% of their weekly year-to-date revenue from 2019. So the week that matched up with us in 2019, we never exceeded 20%, with the exception of the weekend that Wonder Woman came out at Christmas, and then immediately dropped off. In 2020, we were slowly moving up, but at no point have we exceeded 50% of our revenue from 2019. So we are still, as our owner said at an event yesterday, we are still losing money. We are just not losing as much money as we were in 2020. However, we do believe that we're not also losing as much money as if we were completely closed. A couple of our friends in the industry have not reopened yet. Regal Cinemas has just started to reopen, and we could not imagine what their restart costs are after a year. You let a building be quiet for a year, it does not like you very much, and there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenses that you incur. But we are reopened. We as a company will not reopen one facility, and that was more of a partnership ownership decision in that location. We're very excited about the future. We're very excited about quarters 3 and 4. Everything that shifted out of 2020 is now set to come out in 2021 or early 2022. The industry analysts say that 2021 will be, they think will be about 4% off of what 2019 was. We don't care. 2020 doesn't exist anymore. And that 2022 will actually be a 7% increase over 19. So we're very excited with Top Gun and Black Widow and Top Gun, and I think there's a movie called Top Gun coming out.
What's the date on Top Gun?
It is moved to December. We hoped it would stay in the July 4th weekend. But part of the problem is that it becomes this seismic event. And if Universal moves Fast and the Furious 70 or whatever number it is now, if they move Fast and the Furious, well, then that makes Top Gun nervous. So they're going to move here. Wherever Top Gun goes, there is a void and things are just abandoning. So as that shuffles itself out, we'll get a clearer picture. But we know A Quiet Place on Memorial Day. There was a second movie that I should remember that I'll remember about 10 miles down the road. So we're very, very excited. I've only been in the industry since 1980. So it's obviously an industry that I firmly believe in. And I believe that I've now told our owner, I need 10 years. I can retire in 10 years. I just need the industry to last that long. And he has assured me that we will be fine. The interesting about the industry, and I'll move off of that real quick, but the silver lining to our industry is behind the scenes, the inside baseball of our industry is this argument about how movies are released. And it has been an argument going on for a decade. It has been a very, sometime whisper campaign, sometime a screaming campaign. But the silver lining of COVID is it accelerated those conversations. And we probably have moved forward 4 or 5 years of that conversation. So we now have almost certainty of what our industry looks like from a revenue and a product sharing process with the studios. And in many cases, it was very positive for us. So the quick B&B overview for those who don't know who we are a family-owned and operated theater chain. We're based out of Liberty, Missouri. We're privately held and date back to 1924 in Salisbury, Missouri. We acquired just after opening the facility here, we acquired another theater chain based out of Kansas City, Dickinson Theaters, which actually used to have Springfield 8. And that moved us in and we became the 6th largest theater chain in the US. We're the largest privately held theater chain in the US, which becomes important for us today when the Shuttered Venues grant program opens up. We're currently in our 4th generation of ownership. So at the grand opening, if you were at our grand opening, you saw some whippersnappers running around. Are we recording this? Because this could get back to them. So they were much younger. And in many cases, Brock had started to get involved in the company, but his 2 sisters were not actively involved in the company yet. At this point, they're all 3 executive vice presidents. And since this is recorded, I will say, and I honestly mean it, that had their names not been Bagby, they've been Smith or Childers or whatever, that they would have been assets to the company. They like I said, I've known them since one of them was in diapers. And I remind him of that often. He's now my boss. He really likes that in an open meeting, by the way. But we are very, very excited about the future. We actually will announce 4 new locations in the next couple of weeks that we've acquired. One of the negatives, the silver lining is the accelerated process. One of the negatives is that currently on my desk, because I'm in charge of acquisitions, currently there are 210 theaters in the US that are not going to reopen that we're looking at to see if we're interested in. All over the nation. And it's going to continue to grow. We know of 3 or 4 bankruptcies. We know of Pacific Theaters just announced that they are not going to reopen the doors. We don't know what that means. But we've checked on the Cinedome in LA, in Hollywood, and I don't think we're going to get it. I didn't want it ever, but you have to ask when an iconic building like that comes available. You have to ask. So we survived COVID because we are a conservative company by nature. Our cash reserves were strong, our liabilities were manageable, and then we picked up the phone and called every landlord and every bank and said, this is what's going on, this is how, and we've worked with all of them. And so that's been a very, very strong relationship that's helped us survive. And then, as I mentioned, there is a grant program that was created by one of the stimulus packages called the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant that recognized that many of us had 20% of our revenue from the previous year. And that actually, the portal opens today, which is why I'm here and not anywhere near our corporate office, because the portal's already crashed twice. The SBA is running it along with PPP and EIDL, and they might be a little bit overwhelmed. So it's hard to be mad at somebody who's taken on 3 programs into their scope that really were never designed to be in the Small Business Administration. So Ozark Nixon. So we opened that. I went back and looked, and I believe it was 2011. So we're fast approaching our 10th anniversary. We reopened the 10 screens on August 21st under a national program called Cinema Safe, which I won't go into the major details of it, but it was designed by an epidemiologist that then showed us what we needed to do. It's an industry thing that everybody in the industry is following, and knock on wood, thank goodness the dais is wood. Worldwide, there has not been a single case of a transmission in a movie theater through contact tracing. So there are people that have come into our theaters and theaters worldwide that have had COVID, but there has not been a transmission. So we feel very, very proud about that, and look forward to not having to wear masks or socially distance. So the suites open next week. Actually, there's a team here today that I'm going to go and watch work. I'm not actually going to do any of the work, but and 2 things with the suites that we're looking at changing. One is in-theater food service is going to be eliminated. So when you come to the theater, you will no longer go and sit down, and a waiter or waitress will come and wait on you. You will order at the bar, and then a food runner will bring the food into you. If you'd like something else, then you would come up either to the bar or to the server station, and you can get it. It's the way the industry is going. I mentioned bankruptcy. Studio Movie Grill and Alamo Draft House both declared bankruptcy. And part of that is because their operating costs are so inordinately high compared to food to go. Ozark was the first location that we did this in. And I can tell you that if a new facility was built there today, it would not happen. We would go to a food to go. Our flagship in Liberty, Missouri, a $25 million facility, does not have in-theater food service, because we do not believe that is the direction that our customers want us to go. So, so that will be one change. We're not making any physical changes to the building, so we could go back to that if we needed to. But at this point, we're planning on doing. And then the other one, which Steve and I have talked about, is that we're planning on extending the alcohol sales to the entire building. When we open that facility, the liquor license is for the entire building, but we segregated it to the marquee suites. I didn't even think about this until the drive up yesterday, but Ozark was the first time we sold alcohol. And at the same time we were opening that, our friends up north were enacting an alcohol ban in movie theaters. And so we felt like if we were going to do this, we were going to concentrate in this area. Since then, we've had 40 locations that we currently sell alcohol in that are entire buildings. The only 2 that we do not are here and in Waynesville, Missouri. And Waynesville, Missouri was a specific case of the city and the Army base asking us, because of the number of soldiers coming through, that we segregated to the marquee suites, to the bar there. We currently have, again, Ozark was our first food and beverage. It was the first restaurant that we created. And we currently have 21 locations now that have extended food and beverage. That is the way the industry is going, both with alcohol and sales. So I know I went through a lot of things, but if I'm open, I'd be happy to take questions or no concerns. No concerns today. Yes, ma'am.
Just to ask you again, so you're keeping the food,
Correct.
but you have to go place your order.
You'll place your order at the bar. Correct.
They will bring it.
And then the runners will bring it into you. So the biggest complaint that we have about in-theater food service, there's 2 really. One is payroll. You never staff it right. So the day you're really busy, you're shorthanded. The day you're slow, you've got 8 servers running around. The second one is from a customer service standpoint. You're here watching a movie and suddenly somebody comes in to take an order for somebody over to the side, or they deliver the check, or they do that. And so nobody has a problem if a customer gets up and goes and gets something and sits down. But when we start entering in those type of servers, the customer, the perceived customer value goes down. Now, some people seek it out, but that is actually dwindling nationwide than what we've seen. So this is a process that a number of companies have done. We've done it in one other location as far as the food runners. So you would still get that experience. You just wouldn't have and we're also finding that once people get their food, they're really, the next time they see the server is to get the check. So, so this will help facilitate that a little bit better. So that's it. That's the toughest question I'm going to get.
That's a tougher question.
So very, very quickly, since he approached it and he's the mayor and we should be afraid of him. So there are 2 things happening in our industry that I'm really excited about. One is recliners. So our industry, our company is 80% reclined. And so it's a switch out from the true to a recliner. You lose half your seats, you double your business. So that's one. One is in discussions. COVID kind of slowed down all of that. So recliners, I could see us doing very, very quickly in Ozark. We have also started doing these FECs where it is a theater, a bowling alley, an arcade. We've got a location now that we're going to put ropes courses into. It becomes this dynamic facility. I mentioned it to Steve about a year ago. Steve has a big mouth. No, I love the idea of it. I, as the director of construction, can look at it and see where we should put it and how it would interact. And there's obviously plenty of land for no more parking and stuff like that. And it's not to say that we won't do it, but we've got a few bigger fish to fry right now to get through. But yeah, ideally Ozark, Waynesville, Wiley, Texas. There's about 4 locations that I would really love to see us take a serious look at, but banks for some reason are not loaning us money. I don't know why. Something about, let's see if your industry survives. You know, that's kind of a gut check when you're talking to one of your bankers and he says, maybe we should just see if your industry survives.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So is that it? Any more questions? Well,
thank you for your investment.
no, we're excited. It's been a wonderful location for us, and we're excited to be here and continue to grow. So,
Dennis, thank you.
Hey, no problem.
I mean, it was one of those industries that go to is that you're calling, checking, he's checking with me, I'm checking with him. It's like, you know, this whole thing's gonna be a different world. So we just, so that's not that you guys get your, you know, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. All right. We're gonna go to the next topic. I know we're running a little bit behind. Andrea's being patient, but we got one more before her. So, Dave Lawson, with the Ozark Transportation Organization is going to be here. Look, Dave does this every year, and he puts together a regional growth report, you know, to kind of say, look, we're going to look at traffic and how our transportation system is functioning based on all this growth that's going on. And he just does a great job. Dave's background is in GIS. And so his map making skills and stuff are just amazing. So Dave, come up and give the presentation that Jeremy and I saw. It's just a really, really awesome. Yeah.
First of all, hello, good morning. I'm really glad to be here. I haven't been getting out too much this past year. I think this is my first road game in well over a year, and I'm nothing without my PowerPoint slides. So, you know, there are. Okay. Beg your pardon? You can't think of anything funny. But I'm also, I have a background in planning. I used to be a planner, and I'm sure you're all aware of the OTO and the work that we do. We're a metropolitan planning organization, so we coordinate with a bunch of jurisdictions in an urbanized area to collaborate with MoDOT to program federal funds for transportation improvements, and that's all mode. There it is. Thank you. Is there a clicker? We just- All right. So that's air, that's railroads, that's walking, bicycling, and everything, and surface transportation is the big one, of course. So you go ahead and click it. Our growth trends report, this is a trends report, so it compares year-over-year growth. What we do is we gather all the residential building permits from all jurisdictions, and those include Willard, Stratford, Springfield, Battlefield, Republic, Nixa, and Ozark, and then unincorporated parts of Greene and Christian County within our area, and you'll see that in a bit. So we gather all the building permits for residential construction, and every year from all the building departments. And so we put those together in a big Excel sheet by address and geocode them and throw them in a map and count them up. And then we put them into a map, and I have a couple of trends maps, and that's where you'll see our study area. And then the rest of the report is demographics about employment and population and those types of things. So there's a lot of charts and things like that. This first chart, this is single family units permitted in the OTO area. I hope everybody can see it. I know it may be of limited scale, but this goes all, we have these permits going all the way back to 2010 is when we started doing this. So we captured the growth. So this purple column is the total residential units added to our area year over year. So you can see Ozark is the third one down in the row, and it goes all the way over. And so the past few years, you guys have always been around 110 or so added residential units, and that as far as single family goes. Nixa, they do more. They were about 250 single family units. They had some pre-platted subdivisions that they had been filling out for the last couple of years, but they were down a little bit last year. And 2020 is different because we know everything was put on hold, but the construction industry and building, they were essential. So that just kept on chugging along. And with the housing shortage and everything like that, we added a lot of units. For single family, we added 1,143 units in our area. And that is the most that we've added since 2007. 2007 was the last good year before the boom, the Great Recession. And back then we were adding well over that amount. It was about 2,000, over 2,000. This is about a quarter of what we were doing then. But this is the highest total for single family residential development since 2007. And Greene County, unincorporated Greene County is the big winner. They added the most. They added 476 single family residential units because they have the luxury of being in the city utilities service area. There's a lot of growth outside of Springfield, all the way down, all over the place. So multifamily, this is multifamily development or residential. So you can see it's kind of like an EKG, like every 3 years or so, there's a peak and then it drops down and there's another peak. Multifamily, this is a lot of units were added in downtown Springfield because of the increase in students at MSU. And in downtown, there was a lot of apartment building. There has been some in other areas, but that has dropped off because they met that demand. And now, last year in Springfield, there were 499 multifamily units. Those are apartment buildings. And apart from one last big one downtown, which was about 200, and there were 219 in Greene County. The trend now is 55 plus developments. Those are the baby boomers, and they're trying to move them into these apartments and stuff like that. So we've heard about it for years, about how we're going to have to take care of this aging demographic, which I'm really proud of. But it's coming on. So there's a lot more apartment building just for 55 plus in Springfield and in Greene County and around Springfield. So that is not here in Christian County yet. So this last one, this last chart, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's rude. So here we are. This is the total multifamily, everything combined. So this is the highest amount of residential units that we've added since 2018. We had 1,926, but a lot of that was apartment building. So this is kind of a big year, and you can see 2020, a lot of development was still occurring. So we put these into maps, and this is the best part. So we'll just move it along. The clicker. Here we go. So this is the permit heat map for 2020. So this is all the residential units added. So this is, you know, what a heat map is, but I've overlaid a grid of hexagons and aggregated for the total units in each hexagon to really bring it out. So you can see in Ozark, there's a subdivision at the old airport that's being built out as we speak. And in Nixa, you can see all that growth down there. And then the kind of unincorporated parts of Greene County around Springfield. And then the big hot spot in downtown. And then Republic's growing pretty fast too. Next one, please. And this is 2010 to 2020, all the units that have been added. So you can see it's just the constellation. It's really shining bright in that area around Cheyenne, in Nixa. They've been building out a lot, and they're kind of dropping off now. And Bustle and all these other developers are kind of moving a little bit up to the northwest. They're looking at Battlefield and Republic now. And Republic's been a real hot spot too. So this, you can see exactly where all this development has been occurring. Maybe not so much up north, but all around 65, James River Freeway, Highway 60, 160, the big roads. Next slide, please. So this is the Metropolitan Statistical Area. This includes Greene County, Christian County, Webster County, Polk County, Dallas County. And the reason why they're included in the MSA is because they're economically dependent on Springfield Metro. Most people work in the Springfield Metro in these counties. So this is the overall growth from 2010 to 2019. So you can see in 2010, we were under about 436,000. And in 2019, which is the last population estimate before the census data comes out, which should be any day now for 2020. But there's a little bit of lag there. But we had about 470,000 people. So we're slowly climbing up to 500,000. And there's been a little bit of uptick. It's just been the steady increase of about, about 4,000 people, 2,700 people a year. Next slide, please. And this is the percent growth, the percent change in population. So you can see it's kind of declining as far as growth is concerned. And it's been under 1% for a while. So as a whole, as an aggregate for all these counties, it's just kind of slow growth. That's not the case here in Christian County because most of this growth, a lot of it is attributable to Christian County. Next slide, please. What we're really dependent on here is, as far as population growth, is in-migration, people coming from other places in the United States and in different counties. So this is net migration from 2008 to 2019 for Christian County and Greene County. The green column, that's migration, and the gold column, that's overall. So that part that's left over between the green and the top of the gold, that's natural increase. That's births over deaths. There's more people being born than there are passing on. So that's a big part of it, but not as much as that in migration. So you can see in 2016 in Greene County, there was a big drop off there. We had more people leaving than coming into Greene County. And it's kind of important to note, next slide, please, that the characteristics of people, these in-migrants. So in Greene County, most of the in-migration is 18 to 24-year-olds, got a lot of colleges, and these people are coming from different counties within Missouri that are close, like Christian County. So these 18-year-olds will graduate high school in the rural areas and they'll come into Springfield for jobs and education and that kind of thing. So I think the median income of immigrants in Christian County, that average is about $11,000. So they're broke. But every year it's just this constant turnover because people come in, they get educated, they move on in their career and then they come to Christian County. So you can see Christian County, most of that immigration is coming from 25 to 34-year-olds. So different family type situations. Median income for immigrants in the Christian County is way higher. It was, I think it was over close to 30,000. So that's a different type of situation. So most of the in-migration in Christian County comes from Greene County, and most of the in-migration from Greene County comes from Christian County and other parts. But that's what's really fueling this stuff. Oh, you can go to the next one. I read that in 2018, the United States, the total fertility rate, the number of children a woman can expect to have over her lifetime, and men too. I don't want to be sexist or anything. Everybody participates in this. But total fertility rates in 2018 were the lowest in the United States at 1.73. And in order to replace yourself and to have growth in the population, that rate has to be 2.1 or above. So here you can see, I have compiled this for Greene County, Christian County, Missouri, and the United States from MCDC. So you see the blue is Christian County. So that's where a lot of growth is. People are doing their part in making sure that they're replacing themselves. But in Greene County, not so much. They're under replacement. In Missouri, we're under replacement. So you see, this is an aging population in Greene County. It's an aging population, despite the fact that we've got all these youngsters coming in and out. That means that demographic, we need to take care of them with 55 plus housing units and that kind of thing. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is year-over-year population percent change from 2000 to 2019 for the Springfield MSA, Christian County, and Greene County. So you can see the percent change is more impactful in Christian County. That's the blue. So in the peak years before the housing bubble burst, you can see 2006, 2007, a lot of people were coming in Christian County because that's where all the housing was being built out. And it was really high growth. And so that is included in the MSA, which is the yellow, which follows a similar trend line. And this is kind of the trend line that goes back for the residential units too, all the way to 2001. In housing, it's just this, you can see the bubbles just pop. And then after that, everything's just kind of moving along. The impact of this is in those years, 2010 to 2019, the kind of residential units that were being built kind of shifted. There was less single family because of, it's harder to get a loan and those kind of things. And, it was just, they weren't making as much money on single family, but they could make a lot more money, these developers could, by building apartments and things like that. So that's what most of that growth was. But now we've kind of seen a shift where we're getting back to building out the single family residential and not so much of the apartments. So that's more of the kind of the sprawl that we're seeing. Next slide, please. This is the number of jobs by counties in the MSA. The orange is Christian County, and there has been a gain in jobs in Christian County as far as the proportion overall in the MSA. And that's not something to take lightly because a lot of people go to Springfield to work because you've got all the hospitals and the college and the major employers. But now there's more people working in Christian County, so that work-home relationship is a little bit better off. The green, that's Greene County. So you can see the proportion of jobs in Springfield with all these major employers. That's just kind of the engine that makes this work. And I think that I didn't want to gloss over the total population for Greene County and Christian County. Christian County now is about 90,000 people, and Greene County is about 295,000 people. In our area, the OTO, with that map, we've got about 340,000 people. So this is all one you know, one development here, but it just functions a little bit differently in different places. So next slide, please. I'm not just gonna climb walls here. This is the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. This is the first year we've had a full 5-year sample from 2006 to 2010, or yeah, and then 2010 to 2014, and then 2015 to 2019. There's no overlap in these samples, so we can compare the estimates. And so, like I was saying before, in 2009, sorry, that's 2005 to 2009 anyway. I get confused. I look at a lot of numbers and it just, sometimes they lose their meaning. But right now, these 3 different years, median household income. So in 2009, that estimate, that can years before the Great Recession, which was late 2008. So that's most of the good years. 2014, that's most of the lean times. So that kind of adds up all these people. And then the 2019, you can see us kind of climbing out of this. So median household income in Christian County is really high. It's comparable to the United States as a whole. It's over 50,000. 2019, it was $60,000, which is pretty nice. You could make, you know, some good choices around these folks. So this is, you can see in 2009, it didn't really move much in 2014, but this gain in income, this is real. You compare, there's a margin of error with these estimates too, and you can compare the margin of error, the standard error and mean, to see if it's statistically significant from the previous one. And the 2019 before 2020 was that statistical difference, and it is even actually real when you take into account inflation too. So you can see this kind of progression. Next slide, please. Poverty. So this impacts poverty, and this is a little bit more dramatic. There's not a lot of poverty in Christian County. It's always been around 10% or so. It's been a lot more in Greene County because you got all those kids coming in all the time. Every year it's a new batch, and they don't have any money. When they do get money, they come to Christian County. So here you can see 2009, poverty was low. And then those lean times all over the place, across the board, it pops up. And then you can see that effect. And then it starts to lower again in 2019. So we crawled out of this hole that we were in before everything shut down. Next slide, please. This is travel time to work in minutes for all of our communities in the OTO. And you see Nixon, Ozark, travel time was a lot less in 2009. I think that was before they started doing a lot of construction on 65 and stuff like that. But then the travel time increased. So people had to go further to work because the jobs kind of went away. But that has not really gone down in 2019. So they're still kind of, and that's because this one always confuses me. I'm sorry. I don't really understand that, because you can see in Springfield and Republic, people lost their jobs. In 2009, they were traveling a little bit longer to work, and then not so much in 2014, and then boom, it bounces back in 2019. In Nixon and Ozark, yeah, there was more employment and things like that, but they created their gains by 2014, things hadn't changed. So everything kind of moved along. But there's a kind of an axiom, planning axiom is called Marchetti's constant. When a community approaches 30 minutes in mean travel time, then they stop growing. So you can see in Nixon Ozark, you're about 25 minutes. So there's still a little wiggle room there. But with adding these lanes to 65, and they're going to do that from 14 to F, CC to F. There's going to be more lanes, so it's going to decrease the travel time, and it's going to expand the ability, more developable land in proximity to work and things like that. Very confusing. Next slide. This is a percentage of workers by industry in Missouri and the United States. So you can see it's pretty similar. Most, these things there's a certain amount of this stuff as a percentage of industries are pretty similar all across the board because it's all part of the service economy. One thing though, in the MSA here, we have more other services except public administration. Those are hairdressers, those are people, landscapers, mechanics, things like that, and fewer professional, scientific, and management. And those are lawyers, engineers, and things like that. So that's a little bit of a difference there. And information, we're a little bit down on that, but we do a lot more with educational services and healthcare. And that's because of our regional healthcare systems with Cox and Mercy and all the higher education in the area too. So we get all those people from all around the area. Next slide, please. This is comparing those 5 years to see how that changed in the Springfield MSA. So you can see during the recession, that healthcare educational services, that was kind of the backstop for that. A lot of more employment and those type of things that those industries that receive stimulus and those other things, and then it drops back off in 2019. We have picked up in our scientific and management, all the professional people. I'd like to include myself in that. I could mow your yard too. I could do that. But that's where we kind of gain more professional people. Construction's back up a little bit because of all the development. And then we're still struggling with information. Next slide, please. That's the last one. No. Yes. Is it? I'm not really good at ending presentations, but it's over. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here again, and anytime. I've known Steve for a while, and anytime he asks, I'll gladly help out.
Well, we really appreciate it. I think, these meetings, agenda are set to try to put things together that make sense, and so one thing leads into another. So there's a strategy to this. But we saw him do. I had to get him down here to show you this because it gives you the big perspective. Dennis was saying, "Hey, this would be nice to have." So, from business and stuff. So I definitely want to get into it.
Okay, well, I know your time is of the essence, and I know we ran over a little bit because we added the first item to the agenda because we needed to let you know about that particular situation, opportunity, whatever. So we're going to go into Andrea. Andrea has something to talk to you about moving forward about a potential public-private partnership, and I want her to explain that. Okay, so Andrea, take it away.
Sure. So good morning, guys. What was that, Sam?
You're good. I just turned you up.
Okay. If I share my screen, will it cast to the TVs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to do that now. Okay. One more click and we should be there. All right. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you know, we work on economic development projects, and because of the nature of our county and our demographics, just like you heard from the OTO presentation, are formed as a holistic organization. And especially with COVID and the eye on remote work and telework, that can often dip into making sure that we have a strong workforce base to support the type of community and the amenities that we've built out. So one of the things that I get asked all the time is, what do we want in Ozark? And as we've planned over the last several years and that I've been here, 5 or so, and even before that, I hear these things, and they have actually presented themselves in our target industries list. We have talked about wanting a sports complex in this community. We've talked about wanting family-oriented destination retail. We've talked about wanting remote and telework residents that really balance out that daytime population versus our nighttime residents. And it's great to have that verifiable data that we are really starting to shift the scales. And this is an easy win for us because, as we learned and is evident by our sales tax numbers, our 86,000 residents, and for Ozark, around that 20 to 25,000 residents, they gained an acute awareness of where they live and the stores that were local and that were near them, being able to engage in our community. I've heard that we want a walkable community and we want that neighborhood feel. And most importantly, we want our new development to honor both the history and the culture of the community that we all work so hard to build and to maintain relevancy. You've also done a really great job as a board and as a community at looking at creative solutions and not being bound by some of the obstacles that are in our way for infrastructure. You may have heard me talk about in presentations in the past that traditional tools like a community development block grant or some of the TIF incentives that are out there don't necessarily seem to apply, or we aren't eligible for, because we don't have the 51% low to moderate income in our communities. These creative solutions as of late have really consisted of the Finley Farms TDD and the Ozark Town Center TDD. Thinking outside the box and bringing things to the table that move forward the type of community and developments that are a win-win for both development and for the community as well. And my favorite, and probably the best to lead into this discussion, is actually an obscure one. The Morlock Ross Sewer Reimbursement Agreement, I think, is a perfect example of a way that the city was able to partner with a development to simplify the end goal and also make sure that that developer was able to stay on target and speed to market. So with all of that in mind, you actually have an opportunity, an amazing opportunity, in my opinion, to roll all of those needs, all of those desires and those wants for our community into one master planned development. Now, the parcel that I'm speaking of has been looked at by 3 other developers just that I know of in the last 5 years. And in the past, I've had requests or I've had concepts to layer multiple incentives, to do a lot of abatements and either add on to the tax base through special districts or to, again, really take away from that base. None of it seemed reasonable based on what was being proposed. And I have really looked through the plan. I've researched both these examples in our community and in other communities in our region to see what they're doing. And I feel like we really have the fantastic ability to maximize this parcel on the north side of Ozark. You're noticing that I am not referencing the specific developer that we're working with or the site plan, because I want to get your thoughts before we carry this forward. If we continue to this next phase, the goal and the timeline that we have identified with the developer and staff at the City of Ozark is to bring this to you at the May breakfast meeting as well, with actual financial numbers. But there is a 4 to 5 phased approach throughout this development. And again, reasonable is the word that continues to come to mind. This seems like a very level-headed approach and, again, a creative solution. So the overall concept, and if you're open to really identifying this and taking this forward in the May meeting, you'll get more specifics and requests through a developer's agreement. But the concept is to do a public-private developer's agreement to extend the water and wastewater throughout phase 1 of this development. I've had lengthy conversations with this developer where he said, just get me to phase 1, get me started. We often, cost of development is high, cost of growth is high. And being able to share in that reminds me of a quote that I heard from Mayor Jim Gray that was in Lexington when Mr. Childers and I were able to go on the community leadership visit. They transformed amazing things in their community, but the city led the charge. And that mayor said, you know what? I realized that if we weren't investing in ourselves, why should anyone else invest in us? And you've done a great job of that with the other examples I referenced. And this is the next step, I feel like, in really forwarding this community. So again, it would just be through phase 1 is the request, and there are more details of that yet to come. And there have also been talks and discussions from the developer's idea to do a reimbursement at the time of permitting with a potential percentage increase to that, like an interest payment, to contribute to maintenance funds throughout the development. Again, time and specifics are all yet to come, but again, boil it down. The city would be extending water and wastewater through phase 1 of this development, and then also a potential repayment at time of permitting. So why should we entertain this thought? Why not do this instead of a special district like a community improvement district or a transportation development district? As you know, TDDs are only eligible for the road improvements, and the community improvement district really lengthens the time frame for this development, and it also adds to the layers of taxes or the special assessments that are in this community. Through my lens, and that's why I'm such a big fan of this option, we have goals as a community and we have goals as a county, goals that we want to renew the transportation sales tax, goals that we want to pass a use tax, goals that someday I would like to see a countywide economic development initiative so that we're not continuing to layer in special districts all throughout our county. But you know as well as I do, anytime that we layer on a tax or a special district, it starts to muddy in the minds of our residents. And this completely alleviates that situation. When we also look at speed to market, I think it's important that we keep our perception in mind. I am hearing daily, meeting with developers, meeting with commercial brokers, meeting with our architects and our engineers throughout the region, and those that could put their money and invest their money anywhere. We are still growing, but it's also important to look at what our regional partners are doing. And Republic is a name that continues to rise to the surface. This is their winning season, and they have definitely made investments in past years, and they've got a lot to catch up with because it is going to be a windfall for them, and it's going to be really tricky to balance and manage. That's their test, not ours. But again, in that perception, we want to make sure that those that could invest anywhere in our region are choosing Christian County and choosing your community. So the things that we don't know, to answer your questions in advance, we don't yet know the total project cost. This developer is ready to pull the trigger on getting his engineers to run all of these numbers, but we wanted to get your thoughts before that work was done, so that they're not wasting money. We don't know a potential estimated risk, and all of that would be deemed at the time of the development. And we don't know the projected economic impact or the complete return on investment. I will tell you, in this development, there is the anchor that is secured if this moves forward for the sports complex to happen in this community. There is a component for standalone additional commercial entities and mixed use development where you have the traditional retail spaces on the first floor and the boutiques that look much like our downtown square and that are having much success in our downtown district. Then you also have that second floor of office space and, you know, the loft living. The diversity of housing options within this development are outstanding and something that we've been hearing from our contractors associations and from our residents and different groups. I really feel like it's a total package and something that we are missing out on if we do not partner in this from an economic development standpoint. So again, speed to market and why I am a fan of a solution like this and am so curious about your thoughts. This is a very simplistic yet creative solution that allows the city and the developer to both achieve our collective goals. It saves time for both the city and the developer, not having to get an attorney on board to form a special taxing district. It doesn't muddy the waters, as I mentioned, by adding an additional district or saying that we're adding a separate tax in the community. And they are not requesting for an abatement or a layered incentive. Now, there are additional requests that will come forward if you want to look through this as far as transportation and roads, what may be required or how we could partner on that. But at the first, we needed your thoughts. We needed your feedback. This is something that I learned, and I've mentioned it already in my presentation. When I was in hospitality, that front desk, the moment, is what really mattered to our guests. And that's the lens that we're looking through when we're dealing with, again, these developers, our brokers, our architects and engineers. They talk, and it is a very small community. The perception is starting to shift. The perception is starting to turn with these recent solutions of the Ozark Mill and of the Ozark Center, that we are creative, that we want to come to the table, and we are open for business. I encourage you to consider this option and carry it forward. And then I just have the question for you. Is this a solution or a type of agreement that you are willing to consider so that we can bring the next steps to you in May?
Okay, guys. Thank you, Andrea. We're going to have the conversation now. Yes, go.
I've just got a question, Andrea, for you. This is Rick. The sports complex, what kinds of sports is anticipated there? Because I know we've got a really good opportunity to enlarge the sports complex at US Baseball. And I don't know if that's just soccer you're talking about, or if it would be in competition with something that's already going.
It is not. So it would be indoor volleyball, indoor soccer. There is a component of kind of basketball and different things like that utilizing outdoor fields. But this particular owner is in this community, and they have had conversations with US Baseball to actually partner and encourage that relationship and not compete with one another.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Football.
Yeah, Andrea, thank you for bringing this.
You're
Thank
fine.
you for bringing this to us. Could you bottom line what the ask is of the city, please?
So that, Bruce, is yet to be determined. It's in concept, and that's why the developer has not yet paid at their risk for the engineer. They wanted to know if the city was willing to entertain something like this. And if so, we have every timeline nailed out to bring this to you at the May meeting for the specific request.
And this being the thing that might be on the table is what?
Extension of water and wastewater within phase 1 of this development. So not throughout the entire 240 acres.
Extension of water and wastewater paid for by city?
Well, that's the ask. So the ask is, hey, listen, if you bring sewer and water to the property and through phase 1, then the way that you get reimbursed, much like Republic is utilizing this technique out there, it's like our more like us agreement, I guess, is that the city of Ozark were to pay for that, so that the developer doesn't have to go to the bank and borrow that and pay interest and so forth. And then whenever the developer builder pulls that building permit, there is an additional reimbursement fee on there. So let's say your normal reimbursement fee for a single family, normal connection fee for a single family house, $2,500. Well, you may actually pay $5,700 because there's an additional connection based on the cost that the city is needing to get reimbursed for those extensions.
So what you're saying is if there's 200 available lots, then each lot would take 1/200 of the overall investment to see where they're.
Yeah.
When they pull the permit, then we're gonna build it, whatever that split is.
Yeah, whatever that is. Now, that's the residential. On the commercial, it works a little different. So the way that you would see that work is similar to where you see Amazon being built. About 20 years ago, whenever it was, when Republic annexed Brookline, reason why they did that was because there was a large piece of property owned by Drury University. And Drury University was like, this was a donation for us. We don't know what to do with it. And they said, listen, we can probably develop this if we work together. So there was an agreement between the city of Republic and the land owner in that we will, on the commercial side, we're going to put water and sewer and street improvements in phase step. But when you sell that piece of property, when that real estate transaction happens, you reimburse the city of Ozark fully. There's no permit, waiting on a permit. You go buy a piece of property and put this sports complex in that he's talking about, that's got to be built into the cost of the real estate. So that city says, okay, we went out and did this. We need to get our reimbursement. So yeah, there's a little bit of risk involved, but you just got to make that determination of what that risk is, and you know, having the agreement like those, and that's what the developer is. This big project. If these properties try to make it up for, we're wanting to know how much more money do I spend in due diligence if the city is saying, no, we're not even interested in listening to you, or yes, we want to know more. That's something we need to do.
So
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I definitely think it's worth considering.
Okay.
So that's where I stand.
Okay.
Thank you.
I definitely think it's worth considering too, but I think the risk factor is something that's really going to be important to nail down, because Republic had a location right on I-44, and they had commercial people just begging for them to do something. And a sports complex theoretically could be put several places. This I think is a really good place for it. But I don't know if there's gonna be the demand for that sort of thing here, as there would be commercial in Brookline / Republic. So the risk factor is something I would really want to take a look at, but I like the idea, really like the idea. So that, I'm not an beginner, just cautious.
Yeah, great feedback. That was actually something we recommended and encouraged this parcel because of its proximity on the north side. Looking again at our goals of being able to recruit a hotel partner in the coming years, this lands on the same exit that you would access US baseball, as you mentioned already, the volleyball beach, and then this development, so that northern exit and corridor would then be known as this is where your sporting and your youth activities are. And with its proximity and bringing in all of those destinations, there is a space potentially dedicated if we find and recruit a hospitality partner for this development.
And I know I know that the initial ask was water, and so it's fairly easy for us to comprehend. We just had a very large discussion about transportation. We talk about that all the time. We're going to be adding in to our design guidelines that for development comes in, they must do a traffic impact study. Nothing is working. I need to live it, so we know we're going in the right direction. But also, to that's where I went back to our first record that listen, we've got a central study that we did around the big development of the mill. We've got agreement with the Ozark Center TDP to do the southern study, which we're using in that agreement as well. We need to probably consider doing a northern study, because let's face it, we have 3 segments to the community. But when we do that, north, central, and south, we tie all that together, and now the city truly has a transportation master plan. If we have that, yes, developers will still need to say, this is how my little piece affects it. But now I have something to plug it into. To say, now I know what to go back to MoDOT with on the cost share agreement to say, hey, I know what's about to happen here. We need to submit for a cost share agreement on this one. Or over here, over there, over here. But with that, so there is an investment that we need to make as well. And then we're requiring the developers to do that component, we plug it in and say, now how do we work together on figuring this out? And I think the big thing with transportation, as we all know, it's savings. And it's like the developer said, listen, I understand that there's probably going to be transportation improvements required. But if you go in and you make some little 100% of those transportation improvements, then you probably a basis in here. I'm going to build a new building, but you're going to tell me I got to do $3 million in transportation improvements. Thank you very much. I'm not building a new building. It's not a matter of being or somebody else doesn't want to. It's just a matter of it's financing. I mean, if whether the bank will loan you that for an off-site improvement, we're just trying to figure out. So anyway, I just want to let you know, so that could be a component of the overall reimbursement or whatever, we just don't know that. So again, we want to make sure that you guys are okay with the concept before we went any further. So go ahead.
Is Farmers Branch Road, is that study? Is that MoDOT?
That was our special
road. Okay.
Now,
the next road we'd be talking about, at least closest to the.
And it's listen, I drive that more than I actually turn and get on 65. I use Farmers Branch all the time. And so what we discussed is we get time to probably sit down and talk to Green County and our partners and everybody in concrete something for you to say, listen, this needs to be an arterial from this intersection up here in Millwood to Ozark. How do we do this? If you get everybody involved and multiple financial partners, including developers, now maybe you can. Any more questions? Okay, all right, so we'll bring this, we'll keep going and keep working on it at the staff level, and we'll keep giving you guys information. Thank you for staying a little longer. It was a great day. I appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much for making the trip. Amanda, excellent presentation. Everybody did a great job. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with you. Thank you, Mary. You're not